Okay, good day, class. So, this is a recorded session for your second examination. So, by the time you have seen this has already been posted in the LMS. So, we would recap the previous topics under our coverage for the second exam. So, first, we would go back to the topics under the sociology of law. So, law or criminal law itself is a very vast field of study which has its own subparts. So first, as you can see, is yung natural laws. Those are laws which are rooted in the core values of different cultures. Yan. So the best examples of natural laws are those laws which prohibit against harming of another person or damaging property. So those natural laws, which are originally traditional in nature and are somewhat from the words of the elders, yung mga ancestors natin, they were used as one of those early bases sa tinatawag na common law system. Yan, yung common law, yung common na nagiging mali at masama for society. Next are those statutes or statutory laws. These are laws that are created and enacted by the legislative department and is being implemented ng executive branch ng isang gobyerno. So, also, yung isang sangay nating gobyerno, the judiciary are those who interprets and tries those who are arguably violators of the said statutes. So those statutes, most of them are arising from problems that have been occurring and have not yet created or yung wala pang mga batas na nag-enforce para sa mga nangyayari in the previous uh, incidents. For example, ang cybercrime. Before 2012, there was no law which is basically providing stiffer penalties for crimes that are committed with the use of cyberspace. So noong 2012, of course, as a reactionary method in aid of legislation, gumawa ang legislative department, of course, ng batas na nagko-combat or tries to combat and eliminate the different forms of cybercrime and also creating government units that would be tasked to investigate and also of course apprehend those violators. Yan. So yan yung statutes or statutory laws. Also, meron tayong divine laws. These are rules enshrined from the holy books, whether it may be the Bible, the Quran, or even the other sects and religions. Like for example, sa Jewish na Torah, they base their religious writings and adapt those teachings into man's laws. Like for example, sa Christians and sa Catholics, yung Ten Commandments. So these divine laws originated from religious principles being applied to each of those religious denominations kung saan merong mga taong kabilang, and those religious convictions are being adapted into man's laws to make it, of course, legal. And for those would-be violators to come and answer in a court of law kung bakit nila ginawa yung nasabing violation. So basically derived from choosing evil and good. Also, we have discussed about the general types of crime, starting from the blue-collar crime at yung exact opposite niya, yung white-collar crime. When we say blue-collar crime, take note, take note nyo lang yung color blue. Basically, those crimes na ginagawa o yung commonly arising from those lower social class o yung mga nasa middle or even yung mga nasa mababang sangay ng lipunan. While the white collar crimes or those belonging to white collar crimes, for example, tax evasion, yan, corporate fraud, yan yung mga krimen which is associated or originally stemming up from those individuals and entities of a higher social class. Okay? So, yung sa mga blue collar crimes, for example, yan, theft, yan, mga light assaults, threat, yan. Those that are labeled sa United States na mga general crimes. Yan, yung commonly nangyayari. Yan. Of course, corporate crime. These are perpetrated against a corporation by another corporation. Yan. Yung parang against other companies. Yan. Kasi ang isang corporation is a juridical entity. They are persons created by virtue of law. Yan. Juridical persons. So, they have a different legal personality compared sa natural persons. Yan, yung lalaki, yung individual person. So, they are identified as corporations. Yun, yung mga incorporators nila and others. So, once they violate a law, commonly commercial law yan, or yung civil law, then it is part of corporate crimes. Of course, commonly yan towards the effect sa economy. Next are organized crimes, or those organized criminal groups who commit crimes, of course, violations of law, in order to attain their sole purpose of gaining monetary profit at kasama na yung control sa isang lugar. Like for example, yung mga drug syndicate sa South America. Like for example, sa Colombia. There are other individuals or some individuals who take control mostly of the whole country because of the illegal drug trade that is happening in their country since the early 70s. Yan, hanggang ngayon. And of course, most famous dyan, yung mga tinatawag na cartels, mga drug syndicates, which does not only spread their influence throughout their country, but also to other nearby countries, which makes them transnational organized criminals. Of course, na-discuss na natin to, mga political crimes, public order crimes, yan, which affects public order, yan, o yung peace and order ng isang society. Yung ability ng mga tao na mag-function normally is being curtailed or nababawasan. State crimes, those violations of law committed against the state. Yan. So it actually breaks the criminal law. And for example, genocide. Yan. Yung pagpatay ng isang lahi for reasons that are not really acceptable. Okay? When we say state corporate crime, ang difference nito sa corporate crimes is that it involves the government already. Either ang government pumirma ng isang deal with a private corporation which is not really in favor sa interest ng publiko, or those deals by the private companies towards the government in which dehado ang government, dehado yung publiko. And of course, violations of law. Of course, meron tayong white collar crime, yung exact opposite ng blue collar crime. It is defined by Edwin Sutherland as a crime committed by a person or persons of respectable positions and high social status during the course of his occupation or yung sa position niya. Like for example, yung mga CEOs, yan, mga corporate officials committing crimes. Of course, we have the victimless crime. For example, overspeeding. Yan. So basically, don't have any physical victim sa overspeeding or even jaywalking. But because it is created as part of the rules and regulations ng isang lugar for public safety, then it becomes a violation of law. Pero walang biktima. We also discussed previously about the sources of criminal law. Again, criminal law is the branch or division of law which defines crime, treats of their nature, and provides for their punishment. So, kung mababasa nyo ang Revised Penal Code or even yung mga Republic Acts na may penalties, hindi lang punishment or penalties ang nakasaad. It defines the crime or the violation itself, yung mga elemento nyon, yung treats nyon, at yung nature ng offense. Is it a crime against persons, against property? Is it against public order? Is it a crime against the public officers? Yan. So, sa lahat ng mga batas or each individual law, nade-define yung apat na characteristics na yan. So, of course, we have discussed previously sources of criminal law. Of course, first, the Revised Penal Code via Act number 3815 and its amendments. Kasi may certain changes yung batas through the course of a long time. Kasi hindi pwede yung batas, di ba? Hindi pwede ang criminology and even ang batas na maging stagnant or gapundura. That's why criminology is dynamic. It changes as time changes. We also have special penal laws. So ito sila pinasa 'to ng legislative branch of government, pipirmahan ni presidente ng executive, and then it would be translated and would be brought into general circulation by the courts. Of course, ang executive branch of government ang mag-e-enforce ng batas. So itong special penal laws yan, those that were created by Congress, both the upper house and the lower house. Yung upper house niyan, ang Senado. The lower house is the House of Representatives or yung Kongreso. And also, one of the sources of our criminal law, yung mga presidential decrees which are criminal in nature. When we say criminal in nature, yung mga decrees nung panahon ni Presidente Ferdinand Marcos sa kanyang ikalawang termino from 1972 to 1986 na kung saan yung mga batas na yon ay nagpo-provide ng penalties which make them penal in nature. We also discussed the characteristics of criminal law. Yan, yung mga characteristics ng criminal law. First is generality. To put it simply, lahat ng tao na nasa loob ng teritoryo ng Pilipinas, whether you're a Filipino or a foreigner, regardless of gender, of age, of sex, and other personal circumstances, as long as you are inside a territory or within the territory of the Philippines and you have violated the laws of the Philippines, then you are subjected to the criminal law of the Philippines. Pero for every rule, meron tayong exemptions. Certain exemptions, certain individuals, and of course, certain places na may exemptions din. First, yung mga visiting heads of state ng ibang bansa na nandito sa Pilipinas. They're basically immune from criminal prosecution. Yan. So, it is basically immune yung mga presidente, mga prime ministers at mga hari na bibisita dito. Foreign diplomats and ambassadors who are duly accredited and recognized na station dito. Yan, for example, ambassadors ng Canada and ambassadors ng Amerika, pati ng mga ibang bansa. Okay? So, they are considered immune from arrest. Also included are those foreign troops permitted to be inside our territories and are working or under the ongoing operations ng kanilang kasundaluhan. For example, yung mga US Marines na pumupunta dito sa Pilipinas and then they are conducting yung tinatawag na visiting forces agreement, yung mga exercises. But once they are off duty and they are outside or off their vessels or off their embassies, once they are within the normal society or yung regular society outside of their um, warships, then that's the time that they would be subjected to our criminal laws. For example, si Joseph Scott Pemberton. Off duty siya tapos na yung exercises nila, yung balikatan. But yun, merong nangyari sa kanya involving another man, technically a transgender. So yun, patay niya. And he was tried in our courts. And he was also convicted by final judgment. The thing is, nung time na ginawa niya yung krimen, hindi siya on duty. And of course, he is way outside of their worship. Yan. Kasi nandun siya sa motel sa Olongapo. Sunod, territoriality. This principle of our or characteristics of our criminal law, it means that all portions of our territory, yan, nasasakop ng ating mga batas. Yan. In order to preserve our country, the government has the right to promulgate our laws and enforce our laws within our territorial jurisdictions, whether it is imposed by treaties with other nations or states or by laws of preferential application. So itong mga pinagsasabi ko, this would be further discussed to you sa inyong criminal law subjects. But basically, ang common denominator dito is that yung mga batas natin are applied within our territories. So, it is within our territorial jurisdiction. Whether it is on land, in the air, sa atmosphere, or sa ating mga bodies of water. Whether they are the interior waters o yung mga rivers, lakes, mga seas within our territory or sa maritime zones. Itong maritime zones, this is a constant together with other nations as accorded with the UN, United Nations Convention on the Law of Seas, na lahat ng mga bansa mayroong 12-mile limit beyond our shores. So from the nearest shoreline ng ating teritoryo up to 12 miles onto the sea, then that is our maritime zone. That is technically our territory pa rin. The same goes sa atmosphere. Hindi lang sa stratosphere or sa mesosphere, up to the space and beyond. As long as within alignment of our territory, then it's still part of our territory. Yan. And of course, yung mga terrestrial territories natin, yung kalupaan natin, part of the Philippine archipelago. So next, we will be discussing about the theories of territoriality. So first is the French rule o yung French theory. So dito sa French theory, let's take a look at this. The French theory holds that a crime is committed on board a certain vessel even if it is found within the territorial waters of another country. Yan, for example, yung nangyari ito This became a landmark incident kung saan may krimen na nangyari on board a French vessel, a ship. Yan. Pero yung barko was sailing and is within the territorial waters of a foreign country during the time that the crime was committed. So, kung sa French rule tayo magbabase, yung prosecution ng nasabing krimen or of the said commission of a crime would be in accordance with the laws ng country of registry. Yan. For example, merong barko registered in the Philippines and is Philippine flag. Kasi lahat ng mga barko may flags yan ng kanilang nationality or origin nila. So even if that Philippine flagged vessel is within the territory of Japan, kung sa French rule tayo magbabase, it pertains that even if a crime is committed within a Philippine ship inside the territory or the seas of Japan, then yung krimen na nangyari sa loob would be prosecuted in accordance with the laws of the Philippines, the country of registry. Kasi ang gustong ipahiwatig ng French rule is that all vessels, whether they are sea vessels, airships, or even land vessels for other countries, kung asan yun siya narehistro and kung anong flag ang kinakarry niya, it would serve as an extension of that country's sovereignty. Yan. So for example, may mga warships ng United States na pupunta dito. May nangyaring krimen within the said vessels or warships. So hindi yan pwedeng i-prosecute sa ating batas or within our jurisdiction because of the French rule that each vessel flagged by its country of registry is an extension of that country's sovereignty. Kumbaga, kung warship yan ng US, it serves as a floating city of the United States. Floating territory yan nila. So, mag-apply yung mga batas natin sa kanila even if they are within our territory. The same with aircraft. The same with land vehicles. Okay? So, yan yung French theory or yung French rule. Sunod, itong English theory. It holds that crime committed on board a foreign vessel is triable by the courts of the country where the vessel was at the time of the felony or offense. The crime committed affects public order. Yan. Kung dito sa Pilipinas na nakabase yan sa Article 2 ng Revised Penal Code. And of course, may certain exceptions to the rule. But to put it simply, itong English theory or yung English rule, if a crime is committed in a foreign vessel and is within our territory, at yung krimen na yun ay merong nangyayari within our territory, inside that foreign flag vessel, then the crime can be triable in our courts as long as yung krimen na nangyari sa nasabing foreign vessel would affect public order in a foreign country. For example, sa Pilipinas. So again, I'll create an example. You could take a look at the map. Sabihin natin merong barko dito. Barko ng China. Civilian na barko. So of course, example dyan, meron nangyaring krimen sa loob ng barko ng China. It is Chinese flag registered in China. So, nagkaroon ng kaguluhan. Yan. Inatake ng mga pirates, or I should say, inatake ng mga pero ng barko, yung mismong staff o yung captain ng ship. So, of course, pinalabas nila yung kanilang weapons at yun, nag-declare sila ng pag-aaklas within the said ship. But the ship is within our maritime zone, within our territory. If the crime committed affects public order within that vessel, then it could be tried in our courts. Kasi mag-aapekto yan or makaka-apekto yan sa safety and security ng Pilipinas, even if the ship is registered in China. So, yan yung English rule. Okay? Sunod. The third characteristic of law, kanina meron tayong generality. Sunod, meron tayong territoriality. The third one is prospectivity. So in prospectivity, it means that the penal law, yung batas hindi pwedeng makagawa ng batas na punishable sa paraan na hindi naman siya punishable nung time na nangyari. Or to put it simply, for example, sa ngayong araw, nagkaroon ng bagong batas na pinirmahan na kung saan pinagbabawal na umihi ang mga tao. So, may isang individual na umihi kahapon. Yan. Almost midnight, umihi siya. By today, nagkaroon ng bagong batas, taking effect immediately na bawal ng umihi ang tao. So, you cannot make the act of urinating yesterday punishable. Kasi ngayon, nag-enact, ngayon lang napirmahan, nag-take effect. Yan. The penal law cannot make an act punishable in a way it was not punishable when committed. Yan ang tinatawag na ex post facto law. Yan. Tinatawag yung ex post facto law. And yung ex post facto law is not applied in our country. Yan. Unless yung bagong batas says so. But generally, hindi naman yan nilalagay sa mga bagong batas, yung ex post facto law. So, prospectivity. Yung batas natin hindi paatras. Bagkus, ang ating batas moving forward. It is not going backward. Okay? So in prospectivity, ulitin ko, the law or the penal law cannot make an act punishable in a way it was not punishable when committed. So ang mangyayari, the crimes that are punished under these laws enforced at the time of their commission cannot be enforced if it was committed before the enactment of the said law. Okay? So, yan yung tatlong characteristics ng criminal law natin. Una, generality. Sunod, territoriality. And the third one is prospectivity. So, also sa sociology of law, we would try to learn on the history ng revised penal code. So, the revised penal code is a revision ng tinatawag na old penal law nung panahon ng mga Espanyol or yung Kodigo Penal nila, which was then applied up until 1927. Yan. So, ang revised penal code, of course, dahil may revised, improvement ng old penal code ng Pilipinas. Yan. So, the revised penal code was started by the creation of Administrative Order AO number 94 ng DOJ noon. That was on October 16, October 18, 1927. So please take note of these key personalities. Let's take note of these personalities who are key individuals in creating and passing Act number 3815 o yung para sa revised penal code. So, first and foremost, si Anacleto Diaz. Yan. So, ito sila mga assemblymen. For instance, si Anacleto Diaz was the chairman. Yan. And of course, together with other key individuals, si Quintin Paredes, Guillermo Guevara, Alex Reyes, and Mariano De Hoya, sila yung mga key individuals na nag-push para mabago at that time yung old penal code at magkaroon ng revised penal code dito sa ating bansa. So of course, it became successful from 1927 onwards to 1931. Kung saan noong 1931, pinirmahan ng ating dating presidente, Manuel Quezon, na magkaroon ng bagong batas na susundin ang buong kapuluan. So the revised penal code by virtue of Act number 3815 took effect noong January 1, 1932. Yan, yung pinakaunang araw talaga noong 1932. So yung old penal code na na-revise ng RPC, yan, was so very old, 1887 pa. So kailangan talagang magbago for the 1900s. At yung old penal code has its effects up until December 31, 1931. Kasi noong 1931, papuntang 1932, nagkaroon na ng bagong batas, yung Revised Penal Code. Act number 3815 ang nag-create ng Revised Penal Code, taking effect again noong January 1, 1932. Sunod, we'll talk about the theories of the penal code. So first, classical theory. Inadapt din yan sa ating revised penal code. So sa classical theory, ang basis ng pagkakaroon ng criminal liability ng isang tao is by reason of the human free will. Yan. And the purpose of the penalty is for retribution. To put it simply, ang isang individual or ang isang tao, meron siyang freedom to choose what he wants to do. Kung gusto niyang gumawa ng krimen, nasa kanya na yan. He has the control of himself. And once he has violated the law, yung penalty and punishment na ipapataw sa kanya is for retribution. Ano ipasabot sa retribution? Murag, ang term ana is tungod kay nalapas sa balaod, kinahanglan nimo pagbayaran or kinahanglan nimo bayaron ang imong duties towards the government and the people, which is to suffer the penalty and fines. Yan. But of course, aside from human free will, lahat ng individual, according sa classical theory, ay may tinatawag na rational calculator. Sinabi ko na to last time. Kung saan ang mga tao, dahil may free will sila, meron din silang freedom to choose and weigh upon the costs and benefits of acting in one condition. Yan. So again, classical theory, free will. The doctrine of free will. Yan. So it puts more stress upon the effect or result of the felonious act than on the person or the criminal himself. So also in classical theory, it has endeavored to establish a mechanical and direct proportion between crime and penalty. So the focus is on the penalty, not the criminal. Ang ibig sabihin niyan, sa classical school, ang focus nila is kung may ginawang krimen, dapat may malaking penalty para hindi na ang mga tao gagawa pa ulit ng krimen. That is their understanding of retribution. That is their understanding of retribution. Okay? So, next. Dito sa letter C, itong classical theory has endeavored to establish a mechanical and direct proportion together with a scant regard to human elements. Ibig sabihin, yung human element sa paggawa ng krimen, hindi nila focus. Pero, hindi naman nila pinawawalang bahala. Pero ang gusto nilang i-focus is penalty. The punishment must fit the crime. Yan. Yan yung classical theory. Dito naman sa positivist theory, yan, they consider the criminal as a sick person. So, imbes na retribution, ang gusto ng mga positivist theorists is reformation. Kasi nga, tinatrato silang parang sick individuals. Kailangan silang maayos or maalagaan. At kailangan silang mabago. By the time that they would return to the community, hindi na sila gagawa pa ulit ng krimen kasi cured na sila. So, sa positivist theory, the punishment must fit the criminal, not the crime. Okay? And of course, sa positivist theory, dahil tinatrato nilang sick individuals ang criminals, they consider those sickness as a strange, natural, and morbid phenomenon. Ibig sabihin, maaari talagang makasira sa buhay ng isang offender. Okay? Yan yung sa positivist theory. So these two theories, together with the new classical school, yan yung main focus at kung saan na-derive yung revised penal code of the Philippines and even yung mga special penal laws in the next decades. Sunod, felony as a crime. Felonies. Felonies are violations of law classified under the revised penal code. For short, mga krimen na nag-violate sa mga batas na nakasaad sa revised penal code. Okay? So, crime is defined as an act committed or omitted in violation of a public law forbidding or commanding it. Yan yung crime. At di ba yung felony, an act or omission punishable by law under the revised penal code? So, because it is a felony, it is committed either by commission or omission. It is also committed not only by means of fault or culpa, but also by means of dolo or deceit. Yan. So when we say fault, yan, nagkasala ka, gumawa ka ng krimen, you have intentions for it completely, nahuli ka, yan yung normal commission of a crime. But by means of dolo or deceit, yan, ibig sabihin, hindi lang sa pag mismo gawa ng krimen, but also for non-doing or hindi paggawa ng kahit anong action, that is considered a crime. And also for trying to lie towards the prosecution. Yan. Dolo or deceit, fault or culpa. Felony is committed not only by means of fault but also by deceit. Also, to put it simply, when we say culpa or fault, it is violations of law by means of negligence, lack of foresight, or lack of skill. Yan. Unahin muna natin itong culpa or fault. So, the best example for culpa is itong mga traffic incident, 'di ba? Commonly sa traffic incidents, aksidente. At yung aksidente, regardless of sino yung nag-drive, it could result from negligence. Ibig sabihin ng negligence, o sa Bisaya pa, na kay mali na action. Hindi mali yung pag-drive mo, pero may isang action kang ginawa na wala, napakyas ka. When we say lack of foresight, hindi mo tiningnan kung anong magiging epekto ng actions mo. For example, nagda-drive ka ng sasakyan, 150 kilometers per hour. Hindi mo na-anticipate na sa unahan may kurbada, may tatawid na mga tao, nabangga mo, namatay sila. So that is lack of foresight. Yan. Wala ni mo gitanaw, wala ka nagpakabana na mo tanaw or mo anticipate sa imong actions. Yan. Ito namang lack of skill, best example nito sa traffic incidents. For example, nag-drive ka ng sasakyan, 150 miles per hour. Pagdating sa unahan, may nabangga kang pedestrian, namatay. Nalaman na nagda-drive ka ng sasakyan, overspeeding, plus wala kang lisensya na mag-drive. So, the point is, drive ka nang walang lisensya. That is automatically lack of skill. Yung pag-drive mo overspeeding without regard for human life or being reckless. Yeah. When you are reckless, of course, that is lack of foresight. Iniisip mo na lang na bumilis ang takbo. Hindi ka naging cautious or hindi ka naging careful sa pag-drive. That's recklessness. That's lack of foresight. Also, negligence. Lack of skill, it means, to put it simply sa common na mga situations, nag-drive ka, wala kang lisensya. You are legally lacking skill to drive a motor vehicle kasi wala kang lisensya. All of those, negligence, lack of foresight, pati lack of skill, lahat ng mga krimen or crimes that would be under that category is crimes committed by means of culpa or fault. Commonly, ang mga nasa culpa or fault, yung tinatawag natin ng mga quasi-offenses. Marami yan, quasi-offenses. Also, the manner of committing a crime by means of dolo or deceit. Ibig sabihin, the act is done with deliberate intent. Okay? When we say deceit, di ba, pagpangilad, na kung mangilad ka, di ba, na intention jud. So when you have intention, of course, that's intent, may motibo ka, pinlano mo, kaya deliberate. Okay, let's break down dolo or deceit. It is committed when the act was done with deliberate intent. When we say deliberate, sabot ana, planned. To put it simply, pinlano mo, pinag-isipan mong gawin. At sabihin natin natapos na yung plano mo. gagawin mo na at meron kang motibo, may intention ka. So, a planned action. For example, gusto kong patayin yung naniligaw kay Ivana. For example, magpaplano ako kung paano ko siya papatayin. Sasagasaan ko ba siya, babarilin? Sabihin, natapos ko na yung plano ko. I have already deliberated my actions. The next thing to do is fulfill my intent. So, gagawin ko na yung pagpatay. That itself, yung murder na ginawa ko, pagpatay ko, is done with deliberate intent. Committing a crime by means of dolo or deceit. Yung kanina, nasagasaan ko yung tumatawid. Nag-overspeeding ako, wala pa akong lisensya. Hindi ko tiningnan yung nasa unahan ko. Of course, that's recklessness. Negligence, iba na naman yan. So, still, by means of culpa or fault. So, as to the stages in the commission of crimes. So, first, stages tayo ha ng commission of crimes. First, attempted crime. Yan. Attempted crime. When the offender commences the commission of the felony or offense directly by overt acts. Let's do this one by one. Okay, so the offender commences the commission of the felony directly by overt acts. So, first, sa attempted crime, pinlano mo na sunugin yung bahay. Sabi natin kalaban mo. So, may plano ka na. And then, naglagay ka ng gasolina. Yan, buuan mo gasolina. Nag-prepare na ka sa imong posporo or lighter. And then, kanang pagpabelo nimo para napakay chance sa makaikyas, gibutang na nimo. So that is already the commencement of the commission of a crime of arson. And of course, hindi mo yan masasabing attempted kung hindi overt acts. When we say overt acts, yung acts na nakikita. 'Di ba? Yung physically, ginagawa mo. Hindi yung nasa isip pa. 'Di ba? May nakita ka na bang ah, nahuling kriminal dahil nasa isip pa lang niya, hindi pa niya ginagawa. So, in committing crimes, it must be done by overt acts. Hindi yung nasa isip pa lang. Kasi kung nasa isip pa lang, plano mo pa lang, nasa isip pa yan, marami na tayong nasa kulungan ngayon. Each one of us would be in prison right now if a crime is enforced even if it is not yet done overtly. So, kailangan ng physical na action. Sabihin natin yun, plano niya sunugin yung bahay ng kalaban niya, nilagay na niya yung mga materials, nag-prepare na siya, may preparatory acts na siya. So yun, ready na siya. Pero hindi niya na-perform yung mismong panununog ng bahay. The reason is, siguro nagkaroon ng aksidente. Yan. Or other instances na wala sa control ni individual. Okay? So for example, gusto kong sunugin yung bahay ng kalaban ko. Nilagyan ko na ng gasolina, ng other materials. Of course, hindi ko pinutol yung circuit breaker sa electricity. Ready na ako na manunog. May posporo na ako, may lighter na ako. Of course, overt-act yun. Pero biglang bumuhos ang napakalakas na ulan. Of course, rain is beyond my control. At yung ulan, sa sobrang lakas niya, eh, bumaha bigla. So, paano ko masusunog completely yung bahay? How would I successfully commit the offense of burning the property of my enemy kung merong ulan na napakalakas? So, that is attempted crime. That is an attempted felony. Kasi gagawin ko na yung krimen eh. May preparations na ako eh. Problema na pigilan yung gagawin ko ng mga bagay na wala sa kontrol ko. Other than that of his own spontaneous desistance. Na, so, attempted crime. Hindi pwede sa attempted crime na meron ka ng preparation para sa krimen, gagawin mo na sana pero napigilan mo sarili mo. That's not really fully attempted. Okay? Hindi yan attempted in nature. Sunod, frustrated crime. So, a frustrated crime occurs when the offender has performed all acts of execution, na-prepare na niya yung mga kagamitan, ginawa na niya, pero yung resulta is not what he intended for. So, in frustrated crime, for example, plano kong patayin plano kong patayin yung isang individual na kaaway ko. So, of course, pinlano ko, paano ko ba papatayin? Babarilin ba? Sasaksakin or sasagasaan? So, yun, for example, sinabi ng perpetrator na papatayin niya ang kalaban niya, sabi, or panagsak. So, yun, ready na niya, plano na niya, asa niya sasaksakin sa madilim na bahagi ng daan. So, yun. And then, the day comes. Dumaan na yung biktima, galing sa trabaho, pauwi, and then bigla mong sinaksak. Yan. Sinaksak mo 20 times. Yan. And of course, para hindi ka mahuli, tumakas ka kaagad. Pero nabalitaan mo a few hours later na buhay yung mismo biktima. Abi ni mo na napakanan mo siya, maudi ay nagsuot di ay siya og baga na sinina. Unya yang sinina na pajoy rubber. Unya imong pagdili pajudulit na siya. So, yung intention mo na patayin siya at hindi nangyari. The result is the victim, even if he sustained the wounds, buhay. So, in frustrated crime, you have prepared all actions and you have executed the crime itself, pero yung end result or yung mismong product yun o yung consequence do not produce the felony by reason of causes independent of the will of the perpetrator. Ibig sabihin, yung naging resulta ng nasabing yung resulta ng ginawa mong pananaksak, hindi naman yun ang pinlano mo. Kasi nabuhay eh. at yung pagkabuhay niya was out of your control. Wala na sa control mo. For example, binaril mo yung isang or binaril ng isang lalaki yung kanyang ex. Binaril niya sa ulo. Nakita niya pumasok yung bala sa ulo. Yan. And of course, tumakas siya. Not knowing na a few hours later, yung kanyang ex, binaril niya, buhay. So, outside of the control na ng perpetrator. Yung resulta, hindi yun ang intensyon niya. So, frustrated crime, frustrated felony, frustrated offense. Ito namang consummated crime or consummated felony or offense, ito yung perfect scenario kung ikaw ang kriminal. You have performed the preparatory acts. Nag-prepare ka na ng gagawin mo. May plano ka na. You deliberately have an intent of committing that crime. Sunod, ginawa mo yung krimen. May overt act ka ng ginawa. Binaril mo yung kalaban mo. And then, yung intention mong patayin yung kalaban mo by means of gunshot, naging successful. Namatay yung kalaban mo. So that is a consummated crime, consummated offense or felony. Kasi lahat ng stages present from the preparation through execution and accomplishment or having the result that you intended for. So ulitin ko ha, pag mayroon ka ng intent, pinlano mo, may preparatory acts ka na, and then in-execute mo, and then yung resulta, accomplished talaga, successful, then it is a consummated crime. If you have overtly planned a crime, you have done the preparatory acts, you have executed, yan, nagkaroon na ng execution sa plano mo, pero yung resulta is not what you intended dahil sa mga kadahilanan na wala sa control mo, then it is frustrated crime. It is attempted o yung stage niya is attempted if may preparatory acts kang ginawa, pero nung action mo nang gagawin or by the time that you will perform the acts, you will execute the acts, napigilan ka na outside from your resistance or outside of your own spontaneous desistance. So, that is an attempted stage ng krimen. So, let's classify crimes also as to the plurality of crimes. So, first, simple crime. A simple crime constitutes simple when a single act constitutes only one offense. For example, yung paghablot or snatching ng cellphone. Simple crime, di ba? Isang action lang yun, di ba? Hinablot mo lang yung cellphone, boom. Nasa control mo na pa talaga yung cellphone, that is already theft, di ba? The act of snatching, di ba? Stealing another's property without his consent and without his knowledge. So, theft yun. That's a simple crime. Yun yung example. Sunod, complex crime. When a single act constitutes two or more grave or less grave felonies, or when an offense is a necessary means for committing the other. For example, bombing incidents o yung terrorist bombing. Imagine nyo na lang. For example, terorista kayo, may dala kayong granada. Tinanggal nyo yung pin, and then tinapon nyo sa Sabihin natin sa mataong lugar. So after around 6 seconds, sumabog yung granada. So that itself is the act of terrorism, the act of killing others. Yan, terroristic attack yun. So nung sumabog yung granada, may mga namatay, may mga na-injure, whether severe yung injury or less grave ang injury. Yun. So, the act of throwing the grenade to a crowd and then sumabog yung grenade, nagkaroon ng mga namatay, nagkaroon ng injuries yung iba nagkaroon ng mild injuries, eh, each one of those victims will be accounted for. And each one of those, eh, iba't ibang felony, iba't ibang offense. Kaya nga may tinatawag na sa terrorism, 2 counts of murder, 10 counts of murder, and another 10 counts of serious physical injury, another 5 counts of slight physical injury. Yung isang action mo na magtapon ng granada, eh nagkaroon ng napakaraming effects, napakaraming grave or less grave felonies. Yan. So yun yung complex crime. The other mode of complex crime is yung compound complex crime. Yan. Yan yun. Ito namang isa, simple complex crime, is when an offense is a necessary means of committing the other. Yan. So, meron kang ginawang krimen na kinakailangan to commit another. For example, kita niyo itong picture. Commonly, yan yung naging identifying characteristic ng isang robber or burglar, di ba? So, in robbery, sabihin natin, plano niyang magnakaw sa isang jewelry store sa mall. So, of course, paano niya ma-successfully commit yung crime kung wala siyang plano at wala siyang armas? So, para makapasok sa jewelry store, in order to successfully steal all jewelries inside the store, binaril niya si security personnel. Sabi natin, nabaril po siya. Yun. So that itself is already a felony. Pinatay niya eh. But his action by him in order to commit another crime, which is burglary or yung robbery sa nasabing jewelry store. So yan yung another form ng complex crime. Yung kanina, single act, tinapon yung granada, constitutes 2 or more grave or less grave felonies. Pagsabog ng granada, may namatay, homicide, merong severely injured, serious physical injury, at merong mga ibang victims na may galos, slight physical injury. The second form of complex crime is when an offense is a necessary means for committing the other. For example, gusto niya magnakaw sa isang jewelry store. Para successful yung pagnanakaw, binaril niya muna si security guard. That's one offense already. Sunod, ninakaw na niya yung mga jewelries at tumakas siya. That's another offense. Necessary means for committing the other. Sunod, as to the gravity of penalty or offense. First, grave felonies. These are violations of law in which yung batas mismo attaches the capital punishment or a penalty. Ito yung mas mataas na uri ng mga krimen. For example, murder or yung pagpatay intentionally. That is labeled as, sa ating batas, grave felonies. Di ba? Yung nagiging punishment niyan is afflictive penalties. Yan yung reclusion perpetua. or imprisonment ng lampas 20 years and 1 day. Sunod, less grave felonies. This is the second lower after grave felonies in which the law punishes with penalties which are correctional in nature. Ibig sabihin na yung penalties niya is less than capital punishment or afflictive penalties. Best example nito is homicide. Pagpatay ng tao pero not really with any intention. Yan. So less grave. Yan considered. Pero the best example of this yan yung mga um, pagnanakaw. Yan. But actually pagnanakaw is yung mga light felonies lang yan commonly. Yan. When we say light felonies, please take note of the definition. Okay? Those infractions of law for the commission of which the penalty of arresto mayor or fine not exceeding 200 pesos are imposed. Yung mga, for example, light felonies, yung simpleng pagnanakaw lang sa mall, yan. Ninakaw mo yung, siguro cellphone. Yan. Yung fines actually is exceeding. So, hindi siya makonsidered na light. Pero kung magnanakaw ka lang ng malilit na bagay at yung fine niya is 200 pesos and below, yan. Light felonies lang yan. Less grave felonies, yung mas mataas pa doon ang fine. Okay? So, yan yung classification of crimes according to the gravity ng penalty. So, as to the basis of the Criminal Act, itong mga crimes classified sa basis ng Criminal Act, these are 14. Yan. 14 or around 15. Yan. 15 or 16. Yan. Ito sila lahat ay nasa Revised Penal Code Book 2. Ito yung mga articles na nasa Revised Penal Code. Yan. Crimes against national security, crimes against the fundamental laws of state, crimes against public order. Yan. So, I will let you have a research on this. Okay? So, we'll try to take a look at which violations of law ang classified under these classifications. Okay? So, andyan na yun. And their crimes, some crimes na included sa kanilang classifications, andyan. So, the criminological classification of crimes naman tayo. As to the result of the crime itself. First, acquisitive crime. When we say acquisitive from the word acquire, di ba? Kung sinasabing acquire, meron kang nakuha. Yan, whether it's physical or not. Yan. Sa acquisitive crime, when the offender acquires something because of his criminal act. Ibig sabihin, meron siya nakuha. For example, theft or robbery. Di ba kung magnanakaw ka, plano mong kunin ng isang wallet or cellphone? Di ba pag successful yung pagnanakaw, di ba nakuha mo na yung bagay? Then, you have acquired something. Acquisitive crime. When we say extinctive crime, these are crimes when the result of a criminal act is destructive. When we say extinctive crime from the word extinct, may mawawala, either life or property. So, extinctive crime, for example, arson. Di ba ang arson, panununog intentionally? Di ba pag may nasunog na bagay, di ba nasisira? To the point na completely burned down, magiging abo. So, it is destructive in nature. Fire is destructive in nature. Intentional burning of a property or a place is a crime and is destructive in nature. Extinctive crime. The same goes with killing a person. 'Di ba? Nawala na siya ng buhay, 'di ba? You've destroyed his life. You've removed life from the body. Extinctive crime. Sunod, classification of crimes according to the time and period of commission. First, seasonal crime. Those committed only during a certain period of the year. For example, sa United States, 'di ba merong snow sa kanilang mga states or some parts ng kanilang country during a certain period sa year. So, according sa studies, maraming krimen ang nangyayari during summer. Kasi mas maraming tao ang gustong lumabas. Kasi napakainit sa loob ng bahay. Mas mainit compared kung lumabas sila for fresh air. So, mas maraming lalabas, mas maraming tao ang mainitan, mas maraming tao ang gustong kumuha ng ibang bagay. Kasi nasa labas sila. Compared during winter. Yan. Certain periods ng year or yung seasons. Sunod, situational crime. These are crimes committed only when the given situation is conducive to its commission. For example, may nasunog ng mga kabahayan. It is reality sa Philippines, sa law enforcement na kailangan magkaroon ng police din during times of fire. Kasi merong mga tao na hindi ang pagsalba ng kagamitan ang intensyon, kundi kumuha ng mga bagay from those houses na nasusunog. So, nag-take advantage sila sa given situation. Yung sa example ko, sunog. So, nagkaroon sila ng situation na, uy, pwede tayong makakuha ng bagay without much effort. So, yun, situational crimes. Nagiging pagnanakaw na. Sunod, classification of crimes according to the length of time of commission. So, first, instant crime. Yan. Una-una, instant noodles. Shortest possible time. Di ba? Buhatag noodles. Dali ra na. Minutes to play lang yan. Di ba? Compared kung magluto ka pa ng mga ibang putahe or other kinds of food, di ba? Medyo matagal compared sa instant na mga pagkain. So, instant crime. Shortest possible crime. Pag nanakaw, after ko magnakaw, tumakas na ako. Yun, tapos na. Not unless kung mahuli ako or lumaban pa ako. When we say episodic crime, these are crimes committed by a series of acts in a lengthy space of time. Best example, hostage taking. Iniiwasan ng law enforcement na sa hostage taking situations, tumagal. But there are certain times, certain hostage situations na lengthy or tumagal talaga. And during that long period of time, mas dumami pa yung krimen na nagawa niya or nagawa ng hostage takers. So yun, an example of episodic crime. Next, as to the place or location of the commission of the crime, first, static crime. Those committed in one place. Static lang, isang place lang. For example, pinatay ko yung isang individual. Of course, doon ko lang ginawa sa mismong place na yon. Hindi ko na dinala yung pagpatay sa ibang lugar. Static crime, one place. Continuing crimes, those that can be committed in several places. For example, terrorism. For example, yung sa Marawi. Before nila inatake yung Marawi, 1 year ago, noong 2016, inatake muna ng mga Maute brothers yung karatig bayan ng Butig sa Lanao del Sur. And then, from 2016 to 2017, inatake din nila yung ibang places sa ARMM. So that kind of terrorism or terrorism itself is a continuing crime. They have committed the same type, siguro may pagkakaiba din, pero generally the same crime in several places. The same goes with transnational crime. Yan, drug trafficking. Hindi mo lang yan ginagawa sa isang lugar, di ba? Kung ikaw drug dealer, you deal with your clients in other places also. So it becomes an example of a continuing crime at patuloy pang ginagawa. Sunod, classifications of crimes according to mental faculties. First, rational crime. When we say rational, yung individual na gumawa ng krimen, ginawa niya yon with intent. And dahil may klarong intensyon siya, it also means na yung offender is in full possession ng kanyang pag-iisip or sanity. So itong rational crime with possession of his rationality and proper thinking yung offender by the time na ginawa niya yung krimen. Rational siya yung gumawa siya ng krimen. When we say irrational crime, was committed by persons who do not know the nature and quality of their actions. Yan. Siguro ang dahilan na nagkaroon sila ng sakit sa pag-iisip or disease of the mind. So, ayun ang nangyari. Irrational crime, commonly yung mga krimen na ginawa ng mga taong may hirap sa pag-iisip or may mental difficulties when they committed a crime. When you say rational crime, wala naman siyang sakit sa pag-iisip. Alam niya yung ginagawa niya. Full possession of his or her sanity. Yan yung rational crimes. And lastly for today, the classification of crimes according to the social status of the offender. So first, yung sinabi ko kanina, white-collar crime. Committed by persons of respectability or yung may posisyon sa isang company or commonly, yung mga parte ng high society. At gumawa sila ng mga krimen, commonly yung mga economic crimes by those in the economic class. Ayan. Sunod, blue-collar crime. The exact opposite of white-collar crime committed by those ordinary professional criminals. The main reason is para magkaroon siya ng income and of course to maintain that kind of livelihood, to maintain that income. For example, pag nanakaw ng cellphone, that is a blue-collar crime. Hindi naman magnanakaw ng cellphone yung mga, siguro mga mayayaman na medyo masama. Because they can afford. Pwede nga nila bilhin mismo yung store. Pero yung mga mahihirap or those ordinary individuals, dahil wala silang ganong kadaming pera, magnanakaw sila ng cellphone in order to make it as their livelihood para ma-provide nila yung kanilang sarili at kanilang pamilya sa day-to-day activities. So, gumawa sila ng krimen. Blue-collar crimes. So, also, lastly, para next meeting dito tayo sa crime scene and immorality. Lastly, classification of crimes according to the standard of living ng criminals. First, crimes of the upper world. Pareho sa white-collar crime. The thing is, lahat ng mga criminals under the upper world, alam nila yung skills. Included na dito yung mga hitmen, mga assassins. May skill sila sa pagpatay, paggamit ng baril. Crimes of the underworld. Those crimes committed through limited ability. Yung hindi masyadong nagkakaroon ng effort or yung hindi masyadong maigi yung pagplano. But still, committed. So those are crimes of the underworld. So I would end my discussion on that note. Next discussion, dito tayo sa crime scene and immorality. So you can view this in advance. Nasa modulong inyo lang man to. So thank you for listening today. And please take note that this will be posted in the LMS and also in my YouTube account. So once again, thank you and God bless.